My stepmom burned my late mother's things and sent me pictures. My stepmother, Stephanie, and I have never gotten along. It wasn't one big blow-up, not at first. It was a slow burn of passive aggression, of little jabs and thinly veiled insults, all of them orbiting around the one person she could never compete with, my late mother, Mary. But I never, in my wildest, most paranoid nightmares, could have imagined the night it would all go nuclear. The night she got drunk, burned every last trace of my mom from her house, and then called me to brag about it while my dad lay dying because of her actions. The phone call that changed everything came while my dad and I were on our annual camping trip, a tradition we started after my mom passed. It was our way of reconnecting, just the two of us, under the stars, away from the suffocating grief that still lingered in our home. We were deep in the woods, miles from any real civilization. The air was crisp and smelled of pine and damp earth. We'd spent the day fishing, telling stupid jokes, and for the first time in a while, my dad's laughter sounded genuine, reaching his eyes. That night, huddled by the fire, we talked about Mom. We always did. It was a comfort, wrapping ourselves in the warmth of her memory. I was already asleep in my tent when my phone buzzed against the floor, a jarring, alien sound in the dead silence of the forest. I groggily checked the screen. It was Stephanie. It was past midnight. A cold knot of dread formed in my stomach. She never called this late unless she'd been drinking. I answered a mumbled hello. Her voice slurred on the other end, thick with cheap wine and malice. Well, hello there, she cooed. Having a good time with your daddy? Stephanie, what's wrong? Are you okay? I asked, my voice still rough with sleep. She let out a short, ugly laugh. Oh, I'm just fine. Better than fine, actually. I did a little spring cleaning. What are you talking about? It's the middle of the night. I burned them, she said, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper that made my skin crawl. All of her things. I burned them.
It was all junk anyway.
I've always hated how you guys kept her a part of your life, like some kind of shrine. You need to learn to let go. You should look at it as a favor, really. I'm helping you move on. The world tilted. The crackling of the dying campfire outside my tent seemed to roar in my ears. I couldn't form words. My brain was short-circuiting, trying to process the sheer venom in her tone. Burn them? My mom's things? Her collection of vintage scarves, the worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird she read to me 100 times, the box of faded photographs, her wedding dress carefully preserved in a garment bag in the back of the closet. All of it.
Gone.
I couldn't breathe. I just hung up, dropping the phone as if it had physically burned my hand. I sat there in the suffocating darkness of the tent, my heart hammering against my ribs. It had to be a sick joke. A drunken, cruel prank. But then, my phone lit up again. And again. A flood of notifications. Texts from Stephanie. My hand was shaking so hard I could barely unlock the screen. She was sending me pictures. Picture after picture of ashes. A great, smoldering pile in the middle of our backyard, glowing orange against the night sky. And then a close-up of something half-burned, a recognizable piece of the floral quilt my grandmother had made for my mom. The last text was a string of laughing, crying emojis. A guttural sound escaped my throat, something between a sob and a scream. I scrambled out of my tent, my movements clumsy and frantic. Dad, I choked out, shaking his tent. Dad, wake up. He emerged a moment later, rubbing his eyes, confused. What's wrong? Is there a bear? It's Stephanie, I said, my voice breaking as I held out my phone. You need to see this. He thought I was joking at first, a sleepy smile on his face. But as he looked at the screen, at the images of the ashes and the vile emojis, the color drained from his face. He went completely, horrifyingly pale. He didn't say a word. He just stepped away from the fire, stumbled a few feet toward the dark tree line, and started clutching his chest. His breath came in ragged, painful gasps. He was having a heart attack. My world, which had already been fractured, shattered into a million pieces. I was screaming his name, but he didn't seem to hear me. He sank to his knees, his face a mask of agony. My training kicked in. I had taken a CPR class years ago, but nothing prepares you for this. I called 911, my voice a hysterical shriek as I tried to explain our remote location to the dispatcher. An airlift. It was our only chance. The 15 minutes it took for the helicopter to arrive felt like 15 lifetimes. I held my dad, trying to keep him conscious, telling him everything was going to be okay, a lie that tasted like ash in my mouth. All the while, my phone kept buzzing. Stephanie. Calling and calling, demanding I answer. I ignored it, silencing the ringer and focusing on the wheezing sound of my father's breath. The helicopter ride was a blur of noise and flashing lights. The doctors, their faces grim, told me not to get my hopes up. His heart had sustained massive damage. I held his hand the entire way, his skin cold and clammy in mine, and prayed to a God I wasn't even sure I believed in. They rushed him into the ICU as soon as we landed, and I was left alone in a sterile, white waiting room that smelled of death and bleach. Hours later, A doctor came out and told me they had managed to stabilize him. He was alive, hooked up to a terrifying array of machines that beeped and whirred, each sound a fragile confirmation that his heart was still beating. I sat by his bedside for days, watching his chest rise and fall with the help of a ventilator. The guilt was a physical weight, a crushing pressure in my chest. If I hadn't shown him the pictures, if I had just waited until morning, would he be okay? But deep down, I knew that was a lie I told myself for comfort. The bomb would have detonated eventually. Stephanie's cruelty was the cause, not my reaction to it. The doctors were clear. He was in a fragile state. Any more stress could be dangerous, even fatal. And all I could think about was the woman who had done this, the woman who was probably waking up with a hangover in the house where she had erased my mother's existence. Looking back, the signs were always there, written in neon letters that we were all too desperate to ignore. Stephanie's bitterness toward my mom wasn't a secret, but it was something we tiptoed around. My dad had been lost in a fog of grief for years after mom died, and when he met Stephanie, it was like the sun had come out for the first time. He started smiling again, laughing. He seemed lighter. We all wanted that for him so badly that we overlooked the subtle, toxic undertones of her personality. The first time I truly saw the depth of her resentment was the previous Thanksgiving. It was the first major family holiday since they'd gotten serious, and Dad brought her to my aunt's house. Everyone was eager to meet the woman who had pulled my father from his grief. I remember sitting at the huge dining table, my dad on one side, Stephanie on the other, her hand possessively resting on his. She seemed nervous, which was understandable. My family can be a lot. The conversation, as it always did on holidays, naturally drifted to memories of my mom. Aunt Linda, trying to be welcoming, smiled at Stephanie and said, "You're just as beautiful as Mary was." My brother sure knows how to pick them. A murmur of sweet, well-intentioned agreement went around the table. I saw Stephanie's smile flicker for a split second, a micro-expression of annoyance, before she pasted it back on and nodded politely. As dinner went on, the stories kept flowing. How mom used to make the most incredible pecan pie, how she'd cheat at board games, how she had this infectious laugh that could make anyone feel better. My stepmom sat there, smiling and nodding, a perfect picture of a supportive partner. But I could feel the tension radiating off her. Her grip on my dad's hand tightened. The breaking point was the prayer. My Uncle Joe always led the blessing. We all bowed our heads, and he began. "Lord, we thank you for this meal and for the family gathered here today. We ask that you bless our food and our time together. And we especially ask that you continue to bless Mary's soul. May she rest in peace, and may she know that she is missed dearly, every day." The moment he said my mom's name, I felt Stephanie flinch. Her whole body went rigid. I peeked up at her through my eyelashes. Her eyes were squeezed shut, but her jaw was clenched, so tight a muscle jumped in her cheek. It was in that moment I realized it wasn't just discomfort. It was pure, unadulterated bitterness. She was bitter that she had to share him, even with the memory. She was competing with a ghost, and she was losing. When the prayer ended with a chorus of "Amen," she snatched her hand away from my dad's and grabbed her wine glass, downing half of it in one long swallow. My dad, completely oblivious, just smiled and gave her knee a reassuring squeeze. But I saw it. I saw the poison in her eyes, and I never forgot it. Back in the hospital, a few days after the heart attack, my dad woke up. He was really awake, his eyes more alert than they had been since we arrived. He looked at me, his voice raspy from the breathing tube they'd recently removed. "I need to talk to Stephanie," he said. A wave of fear washed over me. The doctors had been so insistent about avoiding stress. "Dad, I don't think that's a good idea. Not right now." But he was insistent. My dad wasn't the type to let things slide. I knew that letting this fester, unaddressed, would be a different kind of poison for him. So I agreed. We would confront her, but we would do it together, and we would do it after he was discharged. The day he finally came home, the house felt wrong. It was clean, too clean. The spaces where my mom's things used to be were now conspicuously empty. The bookshelf where her novels sat was half bare. The wall where her favorite painting hung was now just a blank space with a faded rectangle. The tension was so thick you could taste it. Stephanie was sitting in the living room, watching some reality TV show as if it were just another Tuesday. When she saw us, she jumped up, a fake, bright smile on her face, and tried to greet my dad with a hug. "Honey, you're home." I was so worried. He pushed her away, not roughly, but with a firmness that left no room for argument. Her smile vanished, replaced by a look of stunned indignation. "What's wrong with you?" she asked, her voice sharp. "You know damn well what's wrong," my dad said, his voice low and shaking with a rage I hadn't heard in years. "You burned my wife's things." For a moment, she looked flustered, her face turning a blotchy red. But then the victim act kicked in. "I did it for you," she cried, tears welling in her eyes. "For us. You're still so hung up on her on the past. I thought if I just removed the temptation, you could finally move on and love me completely." "Love you?" My dad scoffed, the sound raw. "She was the mother of my child. Those weren't just things. They were memories. They were all my daughter has left of her mother, and you destroyed them because you're a petty, jealous child. They were just cluttering up the house, she screamed back, her facade of concern crumbling into pure fury. If you don't still love her, then why should it matter? I could see the color draining from my father's face again, a dangerous pallor spreading across his skin. I grabbed his arm, trying to guide him to a chair. Dad, sit down. Please. He snatched his arm away. This was all she had left of her mom, and you threw it all away because you wanted to free up some space? He roared. She rolled her eyes, a gesture of such profound disrespect it took my breath away. You're being so dramatic. You can't live in the past forever. It was time. This wasn't about moving on, my dad said, his voice cracking. It was about respect. Decency. Something you obviously know nothing about. That's when I chimed in, my own voice trembling with rage. You feel no remorse at all, do you? You put him in the hospital and you don't even care. It's my house, too, she shrieked, pointing a finger at both of us. I am the wife now. And if you have a problem with that, then you can both leave. You should be thanking me. With all that junk gone, you can both heal faster, not have a constant reminder that she's dead. That was it. I saw something in my dad's eyes snap. I pay the mortgage, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. My name is on the deed. Get out of my house. Now. He also pointed out the fact that in the entire week he was in the ICU, she hadn't visited once. Not a single call to check on him. Only the harassing ones to me. She refused. The argument escalated, her voice getting louder and more hysterical. My dad looked pale again, and I forced him onto the couch, standing between them. Leave him alone. Get out. She just glared at me, her eyes filled with hate, before storming upstairs. I helped my dad, whose breathing had become shallow and rapid, to his bed, my heart pounding with the terrifying fear that we were about to go through this all over again. The next morning, the house was eerily quiet. I came downstairs, half expecting, half hoping to find her gone. But she was sitting at the kitchen table, calmly sipping a coffee and scrolling through her phone as if she hadn't nearly killed my father twice. She didn't even look up when I walked in. Then, my phone started ringing. It was my aunt. Her voice was frantic. What is going on over there? Stephanie called me in the middle of the night, hysterical. She said you and your dad are ganging up on her, treating her like an outsider in her own home. I tried to explain, but my aunt was already defensive on Stephanie's behalf. It was clear Stephanie had gotten to her first, weaving a masterful tale of woe and victimhood. A few minutes later, my dad's best friend called with a similar story. Stephanie had told him my dad was having a mental breakdown, that his grief was making him unstable, and he was lashing out at her for no reason. I looked over at her. She was still sitting at the table, a smug little smirk on her face, as her thumbs flew across her phone screen. She was systematically turning our entire support system against us, painting us as the villains. I slammed my coffee mug down on the counter. What the hell are you doing? I yelled. She finally looked up, her expression one of faux innocence. I'm making sure people know the truth. You and your dad are clearly not in the right state of mind to handle this, so I'm taking care of it. The truth? You're lying to everyone. I'm protecting myself, she said, standing up. She launched into a self-pitying tirade about how she'd never been truly welcomed, how she was just a placeholder. I finally lost it. You're bitter, because you were never half the woman my mother was. I screamed. Get out of this house, or I swear to God, I will call the police and have you dragged out. She just smiled, a cold, empty smile. We'll see about that. She brushed past me and walked out the door, leaving me standing there, shaking with fury and fear. This was far from over. She was going to fight, and she was going to fight dirty. The relentless calls from family and friends, all repeating Stephanie's twisted narrative, took their toll. My dad's health began to decline again. He was stressed constantly, barely sleeping, and his heart was suffering for it. The doctors warned us that he couldn't take much more. I felt like I was watching her kill him in slow motion. We needed to get her out of our lives, legally and permanently. We found a lawyer who specialized in contentious family law. The moment we sat in his office and laid out the story, the burned belongings, the pictures, the heart attack, the smear campaign, his face grew grim. He told us we had a fight ahead of us, but it was a fight we could win. The divorce process was grueling. Stephanie fought us on every single point, dragging it out, filing motion after motion to drain us financially and emotionally. She played the perfect victim in court, crying on the stand as she described how my unstable father and his vengeful daughter had turned on her. But the more she fought, the more her true colors bled through. Our lawyer was brilliant. He presented the photos she had sent me, the phone records showing her dozens of harassing calls while my dad was in the ICU, and the complete lack of any calls to the hospital itself. He brought in family members who, under oath, admitted that her stories had been inconsistent and manipulative. The court saw through her lies. They saw the damage she had inflicted, her complete lack of remorse, and her burning desire to win at any cost. In the end, the judge ruled decisively in my dad's favor. She was ordered to vacate the house immediately and was awarded nothing. We were finally free. After she was gone, the house was quiet, but it was a peaceful quiet. It took a long time for us to heal. My dad's health slowly improved, but the ordeal had aged him. He was more fragile, more thoughtful. We focused on rebuilding our lives, just the two of us. It wasn't easy. There were days when the grief and trauma felt like a physical weight, too heavy to bear. But we had each other. One rainy afternoon, months later, we were cleaning out the attic, trying to sort through the things she hadn't touched. Tucked away in a dusty box of old school projects, I found a small, sealed envelope. It was addressed to me, in my mom's familiar, elegant handwriting. My heart skipped a beat. With trembling fingers, I opened it. It was a letter she had written for me to read on my 18th birthday, a birthday she knew she wouldn't live to see. Tears streamed down my face as I read the words she had left for me. She wrote about how much she loved me, how proud she was of the person I was becoming. She gave me advice about love, about life, about being brave. At the end, she wrote, "No matter what happens, no matter where life takes you, always remember that I'm with you. In every memory, every moment of joy, every time you feel lost, I'm there. Our love is a thing that fire cannot burn." I held the letter to my chest, the paper soft and worn, and I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Stephanie had burned my mom's things, but she couldn't burn the memories. She couldn't touch the love. That was ours forever. As time passed, the sharp edges of the pain began to soften. My dad and I grew closer than ever, forged into a new, stronger unit by the fire we had walked through. We knew we couldn't change the past, but we could build a new future. And that's what we did. We sold the house, the one filled with too many ghosts, and bought a smaller place with a big porch and a garden. The first night in our new home, we sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. My dad put his arm around me and pulled me close. "We made it, kiddo," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Yeah," I whispered, leaning my head on his shoulder. "We did." And in the quiet of that evening, I knew my mom was watching over us, and I knew, without a doubt, that she would have been proud.